Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. I've got a special treat today. Charles Allen, the president and owner of Diamond Blade Knives, was passing through the area, and he stopped into the studios, and I grabbed him and said, buddy, you got to answer some questions.
Are you getting some heat, Ron?
Well, I don't know. Both of us are getting some heat. Maybe I'm not explaining things properly, but a few folks have written in, and when I'm telling them about these wonderful knives and how much I enjoy them and how they stay so sharp for so long. And, of course, people are like, I'm from Missouri. You've got to prove it, right?
You got to show me. That's right.
So Betsy has grabbed a bunch of these questions and printed them off for me to read.
Hey, shoot. Give me one of them.
All right, great. Let's see what we've got here. All right, so this is someone calling himself MC or herself, and he says, yeah, but then try to sharpen it. This is BS. No sharpening needed. Now, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't know that I ever said there was no sharpening needed. I did say that the edge is maintained sharp 10 times longer than the next best steel tested, or how did that work?
First of all, we did a research with Brigham Young University for 6 years before we ever brought the first knife out. We
6 years?
6 years of research with BYU, 650 statistical tests, where we tested the friction forge technology, which is extreme forging of D2 steel, against 13 other kinds of very popular and very successful knife steels. And what we found in those tests that we would outperform D2 by tenfold. We would also, the closest knife steel that came to our friction forged D2 was S30V, CPM S30V. CPM stands for Crucible Particle Metallurgy. It's an excellent steel, like their MagnaCut. It's an excellent steel. And we use CPM S30V. I use MagnaCut, okay? We use both those in our Knives of Alaska line, okay? So, we have Knives of Alaska and we have Diamond Blade. And the Diamond Blade is a patented technology that took a long time to develop. And we had 3 PhDs working on this project with me. And we ended up with a paper that was presented at the Materials and Metals Conference. So it went through a full review process, and that paper was presented in Kobe, Japan, and also in San Francisco at the Materials and Metals Conference. So somebody says, oh, you're making a claim about it never needs to be sharpened. Well, that's not true. Any knife that you use is eventually going to dull.
Right.
Okay? And you go, well, here's the deal. When you're running a Rockwell of 65 to 70, like the friction forge technology can produce and does produce, then it's just a matter of physics. If it's that much harder, as long as it's not brittle, it's going to stay sharp longer. Now, the neat thing about the Diamond Blade technology, about the friction forging, is if you take a standard, good quality knife made from any of the good premier steels, like MagnaCut, like CPM S30V, CPM S35V, you look at the ferrite grain size, and typically you're going to be able to get those grain sizes down to around 5 microns. Okay. In the friction forging process, this extreme forging, we're getting the friction forge technology at its fullest. We're getting those microns down to 0.2 to 0.5.
Wow.
I mean, so your grain boundaries are very, very small. So that's the key, is with those grain boundaries being small, with your grain structures of the steel being so super fine, your grain boundaries are small, and you actually can develop, if you will, it's more ductile, okay? So it doesn't become brittle. That's the whole thing. if you can get regular D2 and kick it up to around 64 Rockwell, but when you do, don't drop it on a concrete floor or go get a broom and sweep it up because it's going to shatter.
Okay.
But what we did was use extreme pressure through a rotating tool on an anvil with the D2 there. You're just getting a superfine grain structure, and because of a superfine grain structure, we can actually make the blade thinner. We have a device made by Cutlery Allied Trade Research Association, which was one of our test instruments, and we have a Catra machine that we test our blades on. Okay, test them for sharpness. Mm-hmm. You put a razor blade in there, and it runs around 0.45 to 0.50 newtons of force to cut the silicon test media. And I know I'm getting a little bit overboard here.
Yeah, you're getting in the weeds here.
This is a technical subject.
Yeah, I guess it is.
This we're talking about, hey, this is BS that it's going to hold an edge forever. Well, it doesn't hold an edge forever. But the knives are so sharp because they are ductile, not brittle, and the fine grain structure allows us to make the blade very thin. Okay. So if a razor blade is around 0.45 newtons of force in this machine, and you put one of our diamond blade knives in there and test it, we're right in there with razor blade sharpness.
Wow.
So,
but now,
let me explain one more thing.
Okay.
And
all right.
What about sharpening?
Yes,
if it's
that's what I was going to ask.
If it's that hard, it's got to be hard to resharpen.
Right.
Well, you put the right material on it, okay, a diamond or ceramic, and you can resharpen it. But we make the blades so thin because they're not brittle. We can make them thin, and when it does get dull, and it will get dull, when it does get dull, you're not having to remove very much material.
Oh,
think about it.
It's so thin.
Rather than being like this, we're like this. You don't have to take very much material off to get it back to shape.
Well, I have noticed that with mine when I'm doing a deer and elk and all these things, and I mean, I can go a whole season covering stuff, and it's just like, this guy's got to be dull, and it really isn't yet. But I will, at the end of the season, sharpen it. And I noticed that I can sharpen it, and I thought the same thing, because my life, it was like, well, the harder your steel, the more chromium in your steel, and that blade holds an edge longer, yeah, but when it's time to sharpen it, you can't get it sharp. I didn't have any problems getting it sharp. So what you're saying seems to make sense. It's a thin edge. I'm just running it down that ceramic, and bingo, it's right back to shaving sharp.
And if it needs something more aggressive than ceramic, you could go to diamond, and that cuts it. But we are dealing with Rockwells of 65 to 70, and that's unheard of. That's unheard of even in S30V and even in the new steel Magna Cut. You can get Magna Cut up around 63 Rockwell, and Magna Cut is a great steel. We're using it in Knives of Alaska. We like it, and it's corrosion proof. I mean, that stuff's got 5% niobium in it, and it's an incredible steel. It's just not quite as good as friction forged D2.
Well, all these names you're dropping here are also being dropped by this gentleman, James, who says, Ron, these guys are taking advantage of me. You're taking advantage of me, okay? Regardless of however much they're paying for advertising, now he gets into what stuff you're talking about. 20CV, Magna Cut, Vanex, S35VN, the list goes on and on. All those steels absolutely smoke D2, even CPM D2 in edge retention. Bark River Knives, Three Rivers Manufacturing, American Blade Works, Tactile Knife Company, White River Knives, they're all fantastic U.S.-made knives with better materials for the same price or less. How do you answer that one?
Well, those are good companies. Those are good steels. But we're not using standard. It's not standard D2. Once we do the friction forging process, it's no longer D2.
It's more the friction forging that's making the difference here.
It's only the friction forging
that's the
making the
big
difference.
And that's what that 6
we make
years
D2
of research
knives,
was.
and they're a good quality product. D2 knives have been around since the 60s, and it's a good, solid, workable tool, but it can't hold an edge. It can't hold a candle to the friction forge D2, the Magna Cut, the S30V. Those are all a lot better than standard D2 from holding an edge standpoint.
Okay. Well, this gentleman calls himself Thorne. He says he's laughing his appendages off because he says it's really not about the forging process. He says, what about the alloy you use, the heat treatment, and the edge geometry? Well, now, to me, he's contradicting himself because it's not about the forging, he says, but then he says it's about the heat treatment. Isn't that a critical part of forging?
Well, it's all about the forging, and the heat treating is in the forging because we're quenching the forged material within 10 seconds. So the anvil that this forging process that our D2 is resting on, and the forging that occurs, we have a super cold anvil. We've got it gun barrel drilled, and it's about the size of this table, and it's got super cold water going through it. So our quench occurs within 10 seconds, allows us to get our Rockwells up 65 to 70.
Now, you've told me a couple of years ago when I was asking about this hardness stuff, didn't you say that your knives have different levels of hardness in the steel from the back of the blade to the
Well, they do.
edge?
Absolutely, they do. So if you look, Ron, what you're seeing here, you see this shiny zone right here?
Yes.
That's the forged area, okay? Well, why is it so shiny? You go in there and you polish it? No. It's just so hard that when we do the blade finishing with a ceramic peening, that's sort of been our trademark look on a blade rather than a mirror finish. We use a ceramic peening. Well, it's so hard that the ceramic peening can't mar the surface.
Okay.
You see that zone right there? All
Yeah,
of that?
great.
Okay. That's the forged area. That's about a 1/2 inch wide. Okay.
All right.
So from there to the edge, we're running 65 to 70 Rockwell.
All right.
Okay. Once again, if it's harder, just a matter of physics. It's going to stay sharp longer. What's above that? Well, as you go above that, we go up to the spine of the knife, and we want a very ductile, tough blade.
Mm-hmm.
That Rockwell up there is running around 39 to 42.
So that's real flexible or
It's,
bendable. How would you
when
describe
say
it?
flexible, you can't break that knife. I mean, so you can't break it. It's very, very difficult to break that blade. That blade will give before it will break. And
Now-
if you were Rockwelling, if you had 65 to 70 Rockwell all through the non-forged area, it would fail. When you put any kind of transverse load on it, when you started to tweak it a little to the side, it would snap.
Well, when I started using your knives years ago, I thought, man, I got to watch that edge. It's going to chip. It's going to break. It's hard. And it's never happened. I've got many knives that have little notches in them where you hit a bone or something and you torqued it and
Right.
just snaps that edge off.
Right.
And I've never had that happen with yours. So I'm not blowing smoke here, guys. This is just what I've observed. And you can tell that I don't know that much about the technology. I'm like your average hunter. I appreciate a good knife that works. Gentlemen like this can tell me why it works. And obviously, a lot of you who wrote in know all about your steels and quite a bit about the whole process, too. And we appreciate that. It helps all of us understand how all this stuff is put together and how it works. But it sounds to me like you've got something special figured out here. And I've seen it in the field. Now, for those of you who are listening to the podcast and not watching it on the YouTube channel, you cannot see what Charles has been telling us about these colors. So let me explain it to you. If you look at the knife starting from the top or the spine of the knife, and the side of the knife has a color tone to it, kind of flat peen that you did, and then all of a sudden it turns a little bit shinier, and that's where this difference in the forging is to change the Rockwell hardness. Am I got that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So you're going to see that on these diamond blade knives. Now with your Now, that other steel you were mentioning, that good one that you're using in Knives of Alaska now, that Mark, what did you call it?
MagnaCut.
MagnaCut.
MagnaCut steel. That's a CPM product. CPM stands for Crucible Particle Metallurgy. We get the MagnaCut through a company in New York named Niagara. That's where we buy pretty well all of our steels, including our D2, and it's a tremendous steel. It's stainless, and it's got a Rockwell of right up. You can get up 62, 63, and that's approaching where we are with Diamond Blade.
Then what's the price difference? And your Knives of Alaska line is priced lower than your Diamond Blade.
That's correct. And the Diamond Blade knives, they're challenging to make. We make them essentially one at a time, the forging process. And we're not having to do that with our Knives of Alaska line. We've got lasers that cut out the blades and automated sharpening and our automated grinding. And so with the forge process, there's just a lot more steps to get this product into the field.
Well, say your average hunter who appreciates a good knife in the field and likes that sharp edge. He's not getting into the weeds on this stuff. He's not, what would you call someone who is just a rifle nuts, I understand. Knife nuts? Do you have a name for knife nuts?
Knife nuts.
People are just love knives. They just dote on them. They collect them, and they just play around, use everything with knives. But the average guy just wants a good hunting knife. Is he going to be pretty happy with a Knives of Alaska version rather than having to spend the extra money? I mean, what's the price difference between the two lines on average?
Oh, let's just say a knife of that size in Knives of Alaska with a sure grip handle, a rubberized handle.
Kind of like this one?
Yeah, that's a G10 handle right
Okay.
there. Okay. You're looking typically at around $100 to $125 to $150 difference between a Knives of Alaska product and a Diamond Blade product. Diamond Blades are typically a little more dressed up. They've got the mosaic pins on some of them. The more exotic handles, stag, desert ironwood, bird's eye maple. We know if you're going to pay a little more money for the technology, we're going to try to make them really nice for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I don't know. I think you've answered a lot of these questions. There's a few more here, but I'm seeing all these steels like the M390 and an S35VN and the CPMs and all the rest of it. I think you've covered it well enough here. We really don't need to go any deeper into that.
Well, certainly one of your viewers could go to our website, diamondbladeknives.com, and the research results are there. And this isn't just me talking. We've got esteemed metallurgists from Brigham Young University in a peer-reviewed paper that was presented at a conference in both Japan and in San Francisco, and it's saying essentially this: hey, this friction forging is going to outperform. Friction forged D2 will outperform standard D2 heat treated at its maximum capability by tenfold.
Tenfold, yeah. That's
cutting test.
I think that's what impresses people and/or makes them disbelievers.
That's just what makes them disbelieve.
Yeah.
When you start saying that, and when you start talking about Rockwells of 65 to 70, people are like, yeah, right. That thing is going to be so brittle. As soon as you open that thing up and touch a bone, it's gone. Well, that's not the case.
Friction forging is what fixed it, right?
Forging has been around for centuries centuries, okay? First it was done with a hammer, okay? Then it was done with a trip hammer, and what we've done is we've just taken it to the next level. So we're using tons and tons and tons of pressure through a rotating tool made from CBN, cubic boron nitride, which is the only material that will hold up to that kind of pressure and that kind of heat. Then that forged area is quenched within 10 seconds. We've got superfine grain structure, and we've got a Rockwell 65 to 70. If it's that much harder and it's not brittle, it's going to hold an edge that much longer. Will they ever need sharpening? Absolutely. How are you going to sharpen them? Try ceramic at first. If they need a little more, go to diamond. And we have a lifetime free resharpening service at Knives of Alaska and Diamond Blade Knives. Send it in, we'll recondition the whole knife, resharpen it for you, send it back to you, no charge.
Oh, pretty sweet. Well, you've pretty much answered these questions before you even have to ask them. But I want to do one here from Donald, and he's saying, you just answered it, but he said, I've looked into this a while back, and I saw your advertising Diamond Blade knives, but I couldn't find any data to back that up. That wasn't also them advertising. Because I always tell folks to fully understand this friction forging technology, go to your website where you explain it quite well. And he's saying, well, that's the only place I can find any information on it. Are there any outside firms? You mentioned this conference in San Francisco and one in Japan, and peer-reviewed and all that stuff. Would that be other?
That reference is in the website.
Okay.
And also, the other thing is the Discovery Channel came, the TV show, How It's Made.
I don't watch much TV, but I'll take your word for it.
It's a technology show. They came in and filmed our operation.
So they explained it all
several years ago, but
can people find that if they search for it on the web?
I haven't looked for it, but I would assume you could go to How It's Made and key in Diamond Blade Knives, and I'm sure it might pop up.
Oh, that'd be fun. Well, I don't know. I think you've answered the questions pretty darn well. Went over my head with a lot of those numbers, but I can tell you this much: I take this hunting, and it does what I need it to do, and I don't have to spend 4 days sharpening it when I'm done. In fact, I can go a couple of years and not even need to try to sharpen it.
Well, what we want is we want a quality product. We're going to stand behind our products forever, okay? We have a lifetime warranty on all of our Diamond Blade knives, all of our Knives of Alaska line. We want a lifetime warranty, free resharpening. We stand behind our product, and we've always been made in the USA. We make all of our knives in Denison, Texas, in our factory there. It's where we've always been, and we stand behind our product.
Right. There you have it, folks. You can understand why we are proud to have Diamond Blade Knives and Knives of Alaska as sponsors of Ron Spomer Outdoors. I like quality materials. I like good, honest folks who stand behind what they say. And Charles, you've just been that for several years now.
It's been a pleasure coming by and seeing your beautiful place here out in Idaho. It's just a pleasure to work with you and your professionalism with your team, and we're happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. If you have any questions about Diamond Blade Knives or Knives of Alaska, you're welcome to comment and ask me about it. But if you want to go directly to Charles, how would they get a hold of you?
Call the factory and ask for me. I'll be glad to talk to you.
Cool. There you go, folks. Diamond Blade Knives. I would recommend that everyone look into a knife that works for you. I never tell anyone to absolutely have to have this product. I certainly think certain ones are better than others, and I'm sure high on these. But get yourself a good hunting knife. Understand what makes it tick. Learn how to sharpen it. I am always amazed at how many hunters I come across who cannot sharpen a knife. I don't care what the quality or price of that knife is. They just do not get it. And it is a skill you have to learn, but it's not that difficult once you get it figured out. But make your knives an important part of your hunting setup, because they are. Your rifle and your scope and all the fancy camo clothes you get and everything else.
You get that animal down. It's
knife time.
That's right. It's crunch time, especially if it's raining and about dark. You don't have time to be dealing with a poor quality knife.
There you go.
And we were outfitters in Alaska. We just sold our operation in Alaska here a couple of years ago. But I was a master guide in Alaska, and that's where we did the field testing on all of the Knives of Alaska and all of the Diamond Blade knives. And before I ever had the Diamond Blade line perfected, before we had it developed, we always carried our Knives of Alaska into the field with us, of course, when we were hunting brown bears and big bull moose. And typically I would carry 3 or 4, 5 different Knives of Alaska knives, maybe a little different shape. But when you start tackling a 1,000-pound brown bear that's been rolling in the sand just off the Gulf of Alaska, or a big bull moose that's been in rut, you got mud all over him, sand all over him, you go through knives in a hurry. So I would always carry 4, 5, 6 Knives of Alaska. Once we developed the diamond blade line, I carried 2 knives. I carried a little combination set.
This one right here?
I carried this knife right here, the Summit, and I carried this knife right here, the Pinnacle 2. Pinnacle 2 is like a scalpel. Very, very sharp point. I make all my initial incisions with that. Then I lay that down and go to this to do all the fleshing and break the animal down. But I no longer had to carry 6 knives into the field. I could carry those 2 diamond blade knives, and I would get through that entire bear or that entire big bull and do it effectively. And then the question becomes, well, would it still shave when you got through? Well, sometimes, and sometimes not. If that big brown bear had been wallowing in the sand up there, sand is silica. Silica is very, very hard. It's what they make glass out of, and it'll dull an edge quick. You get back to the lodge, you may have to touch it up, and I would touch it up with ceramic, be ready to go for the next round.
Yeah. There you go, folks. Have a good knife, and run into a bear or a moose, you've got something to take care of it. Hey, I appreciate you stopping in, Charles.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, no, man, it's my pleasure. You're welcome here anytime. Next time, let's plan for you to come during a hunting season, and we could take advantage of the great outdoors around here.
I want to do that.
Sound good?
I want to do that.
Okay, folks, there you have it. Knives from a man who seems to know what he's talking about, Charles Allen of Knives of Alaska and Diamond Blade Knives. 2 sponsors for Ron Spomer Outdoors. We're so tickled to have them. I wish all of you a great hunting season this year. I hope your rifles and your bullets work the way they're supposed to, and then I hope your knives work the way they're supposed to. Let me know how you did. Send us some pictures. Always happy to hear from you. Until next time, this is Ron Spomer signing off. Hunt honest and shoot straight.